and welcome to Enhancing Clinical Practice stream of SNOMED CT Expo 2020. My name is Farzan Ashrafi and I'm a senior terminologist at SNOMED CT International. I will be moderating today's session. Please use the Q&A box to type your questions to the presenter. All questions will be answered at the conclusion of the presentation. I am now pleased to introduce Judy Harrison from MedDRA and Jane Millar from SNOMED International, who will be presenting SNOMED CT and MedDRA supporting clinical safety. Judy, please proceed.
Thank you. I'm Judy Harrison, Chief Medical Officer of the MedDRA Maintenance and Support Services Organization. I'm honored to share this presentation with Jane Millar from SNOMED International. Here are the topics that we'll cover today. First, I'll provide a brief introduction to MedDRA as a regulatory terminology before going on to give an overview of the WEB-RADR 2 project. I will then describe a key deliverable of this project, which was the development of maps between SNOMED CT and MedDRA terminologies. I'll then hand over to Jane to bring us up to date on the initial alpha testing and review of the maps and plans for future maintenance. But first, a few words about MedDRA. MedDRA was first developed in the late 1990s by the International Council for Harmonization, or ICH. It's a clinically validated international medical terminology used by regulatory authorities globally and the regulated biopharmaceutical industry. The terminology is used through the entire clinical development process, from pre-marketing phase 1 clinical trials through the clinical trial development process into the post-marketing arena. And it is used for data entry or coding, as well as subsequent retrieval, evaluation, and presentation of data. It covers a range of regulated medical products, such as drugs, biologics, and medical devices. MedDRA has a global reach with over 6,500 subscribing organizations in 126 countries. It's currently available in 14 different languages. In its essence, it contains over 80,000 terms in a 5-level hierarchy, and is updated twice a year in March and September. Similar to SNOMED CT, there was an additional interim release in April this year to accommodate terms for the COVID-19 pandemic. Now some words about the WEB-RADR 2 project. WEB-RADR stands for Web Recognizing Adverse Drug Reactions, and it was a project conducted under the auspices of the Innovative Medicines Initiative, which is a public-private partnership funded by the European Commission. The project sought to expand on the functionality of an application that was developed in the first WEB-RADR project. This is a platform designed to increase engagement in patient safety using multiple channels. What I'm showing here on the screen is the Yellow Card app, which is used by the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency in the UK, MHRA. With feedback from users, we determined that they wanted additional functionality of this application. They wanted to have access online through a variety of channels and to be able to integrate it into their own systems. And further opportunities were also highlighted by the need for two-way integration in electronic patient records in the bottom right part of the screen. Now, to deliver this functionality, a WEB-RADR Vigilance Hub was developed, and variations of the application have been rolled out in multiple countries to date. To support the exchange of data between clinical systems, electronic patient records, and regulatory systems, where MedDRA is the terminology used, bidirectional maps between SNOMED CT and MedDRA were considered essential for interoperability. The next slide shows the WEB-RADR 2 consortium partners, and it was a true collaboration with all organizations committing to future sustainability of the outputs developed beyond the project. This is in support of patient safety. Now let's look in more detail about terminology interoperability. It's been long recognized that there is a need to be able to exchange data between the electronic health record systems and the drug regulatory arena using standardized terminologies such as SNOMED CT and MedDRA. And this is to support better public health information and patient safety. The aims of this part of the WEB-RADR project were twofold. First, to develop bidirectional independent maps between SNOMED CT and MedDRA, starting with a priority set of frequently used MedDRA terms from pharmacovigilance databases. And we can see apparently two use cases. In the SNOMED CT to MedDRA direction, we could see that a map would facilitate the conversion of SNOMED CT encoded data in electronic health records to MedDRA as a source for adverse event reporting to regulatory authorities. In the other direction, with the MedDRA to SNOMED CT map, we can see how this map would allow the MedDRA coded data that is in product labels, for example, a black box warning, would be made accessible in clinical decision support systems using that map. And the second aim of the part of the project was to develop ownership, maintenance, licensing, and distribution arrangements between ICH, which is the MSSO's head organization, and SNOMED International, to be able to enable sustainable implementation beyond the end of the project. And I think it's important to emphasize that this is the first time that the terminology owners themselves, ICH and SNOMED International, have collaborated to produce endorsed standardized maps. Next, I'll go on to describe the actual development of the maps. First of all, to temper your expectations somewhat, it should be noted that the maps do not represent a complete map between the two terminologies, but rather an agreed subset of important pharmacovigilance terms. So our starting data source was a set of 7,349 MedDRA lowest level terms, and these are somewhat analogous to the synonym level in SNOMED CT. They were derived from databases held by the European Medicines Agency and the MHRA, and they included several fields that are important in regulatory adverse event reporting: the adverse events themselves, medical history, as well as the indications for use. And you'll see here nausea, fever, vomiting, very frequently reported terms within those databases. But we didn't want to restrict the data set to only the most frequently reported, but we wanted to include other clinically important terms for serious adverse events. And for this, we used the EMA's designated medical events list that comprises about 65 terms that are representing serious adverse events. It includes things like Stevens-Johnson syndrome, aplastic anemia, and acute hepatic failure. The next slide shows the process behind the actual mapping. Mapping process was rigorous and entirely manual, and representatives from SNOMED International and the MedDRA MSSO, as well as regulatory authorities and industry, participated in this process. Now, it would have been nice if we could have leveraged some natural language processing tools to be able to find automatic matches between the two terminologies. However, as we went through the process, it became obvious that even apparent direct matches for terms could be misleading, and you really had to use medical knowledge and thorough knowledge of the two terminologies to find the exact conceptual matches through an understanding of the respective structures of the terminologies. We used a dual independent mapping process governed by documented mapping conventions, which were shown at the top of the graphic. SNOMED International configured a mapping tool for the project. The set of 7,300 terms was divided by two mapping teams, and within each team, two mappers mapped each term independently, selecting exact conceptual matches for MedDRA lowest level terms to SNOMED fully specified names, or FSNs. When they were in conflict, a QA person would be alerted and would attempt to find a consensus decision between the two mappers. And then representatives from both the MedDRA MSSO and SNOMED International did a 100% final QA check. Once a term was mapped from MedDRA to SNOMED CT and QA'd, the SNOMED CT term was then mapped to MedDRA to create that independent map. This slide shows the map deliverables. Two independent maps were created. The MedDRA to SNOMED CT map ended up with 6,300 lowest level terms mapped to SNOMED CT FSNs, fully specified names. In the other direction, the independent map of SNOMED CT to MedDRA was about 3,600 FSNs mapped to lowest level terms. Now you may wonder why, if we started with 7,300 LLTs, why does the final MedDRA to SNOMED map only have 6,300 or so? Well, this is because there are different structures and scopes of the two terminologies, and some terms that were in the initial data set could not be mapped. Broadly speaking, these were medication error terms and product quality terms that have a place in MedDRA as a regulatory terminology, but would not be used in SNOMED for a clinical patient record. So that's why the ending number is smaller than the starting number. Now you might also ask, why is the MedDRA to SNOMED map bigger than the SNOMED CT to MedDRA map? Well, this is explained by the fact that we're starting with MedDRA lowest level terms, which are equivalent to SNOMED CT synonyms. So we have many spelling variants, lexical variants, and other synonyms. So we might map several LLTs to the same FSN in that direction. As an example, in MedDRA, we have UK and US spellings at the LLT level. So we would map edema with an O and edema without an O to the single FSN of edema, which uses the US spelling. The project deliverables are available in two formats, RF2 for SNOMED CT users, and a simple spreadsheet format for our MedDRA users. The content is identical, regardless of the format. Another deliverable were the mapping conventions. These were developed and revised throughout the project, and it was important to ensure consistency in the mapping. It covers general handling of issues like UK and US spellings, as well as specific topics, for example, related to how we map the tumor types and stages, for example. They will be available to users to understand how the maps were created and to help users interpret the results obtained when using the maps. They will also be used internally between SNOMED International and the MSSO for ongoing maintenance and updating. This slide actually shows some map examples in the MedDRA to SNOMED CT direction and the other map from SNOMED CT to MedDRA. And here you can note the LLT name and code and the corresponding maps to the FSNs and codes. It's the exact conceptual matches. We can see the parentheses, the various domains in SNOMED CT where the FSNs reside. Most of them were disorders, but we also have findings and procedures, for example. This slide shows the timeline around the project and the next steps. The end date of the WEB-RADR 2 project was delayed and impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, so we actually wrapped up the project in June this year. And if anybody is interested in learning more about the project, we conducted some stakeholder webinars in the June timeframe, and you can access those from the WEB-RADR 2 site. We're currently in the process of wrapping up an alpha testing period, and I will now hand over to Jane Millar from SNOMED International. Jane is going to discuss the alpha test period and plans for future maintenance beyond the first production release in April 2021. So thank you. I'll hand over to Jane.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you for handing over and for explaining the detail about the WEB-RADR 2 project and how we got to where we are now. I want to focus now a little bit about the alpha testing and review of the maps that we are just completing. That phase is just completing. And then talk about next steps, and how we plan to look after these maps as two organisations over time. So as part of the project, we went at the end of the project, we went into an alpha testing phase of the two maps, which completes at the end of September. These were based on MedDRA. This period was based on the MedDRA version 21.1, which was released in September 2018, and SNOMED CT January 2019 International Edition. The maps. Each map is based on those versions, and the whole reason to actually undertake a review period was to get feedback on the quality and accuracy of the content of the maps, and also if there was anybody out there who was prepared to have a look at the technical representation of the SNOMED CT RF2 version, which obviously goes into electronic systems. Participants came forward from both the MedDRA community and SNOMED International, and had to be licensees of either MedDRA or SNOMED CT, or both, because they're the people who actually have got knowledge about the terminologies themselves, and therefore can give us good insight into the work and give us good feedback. And the participants for this came from the regulators, from industry, the vendors, the software suppliers, researchers, clinical folks, informaticians and terminologists, and SNOMED International member countries also have had a look at the two products. And the key reason for doing this was to signal that to both communities, these products were on their way, and there were going to be new products from both organisations. And I think that's key. And Judy mentioned this as well. Neither organisation has ever produced SNOMED maps between SNOMED CT and MedDRA in either direction formally. And so this is the first time that we've done it. Moving on a little bit then to where we are now. Before we do that, I'd like to just talk a little bit about the protocol that we put together for the users, people who wanted to actually have a look at this. We wanted the respondees to be able to give us details of the use cases they were looking at when they actually looked at the maps, whichever maps they looked at, because this again reinforced how these maps could be used. Judy talked about the two use cases from the project initially, but we know there are many other use cases out there for the use of these maps. We also wanted to know if they'd used any existing data to do a comparison, because we do know there are maps out there which people have developed, and the problem with individual development is that we don't actually have a standard version. And also any areas of the maps which people had looked at. Judy mentioned the mapping conventions document, which is a key document to ensure consistency across the maps, and also help the mappers themselves to understand the products that they're looking at and the rules that have been applied to the products that also apply to the maps. So we shared that document to enable reviewers to actually understand the maps and help them to understand what they were looking at and enable them to make comments. Plus, it would be helpful to receive any feedback on the conventions document itself and anything they felt should be added to it. they were also asked to, if people had existing maps, could they compare them? Though, of course, we needed to know if they were comparing, whether they were comparing like to like, i.e. which versions of the underlying terminologies, MedDRA and SNOMED CT, their maps had been based on. I already talked about, we wanted also to receive feedback on the format and the technical side of it, because we actually wanted to know whether there was any issues with the software usage. 50 organizations expressed an interest in participating in this. And we are currently, as we record this, we are coming towards the end of September, and we are receiving some feedback, obviously nearer the deadline. But we also know that it's been a difficult period with COVID for people to spend time looking at these types of products. The plan now is to analyze the feedback that we've had, both the content and the format changes to the maps. One of the things that we were very, very clear about was that we weren't going to extend the scope of the maps for the first release. It will be what's there, what we already defined as the priority set, and Judy's gone into some detail on. So once we've had a look at the feedback, we will put together a plan to update the maps based on the SNOMED CT International Edition, which will comes out in January 2021, and MedDRA and the MedDRA version, which is the September 2020. So the planning is going to be done now, and we'll be able to do the updating of the maps in January when the SNOMED CT International Edition is available. We have agreed to extend the maps to incorporate COVID-19 terms, which are required by the regulators. Both the FDA and the European Medicines Agency have got together and are requiring some information to flow about COVID-19, and they've asked us to extend the maps to support that, which both organisations have readily agreed to, since each organisation has also issued COVID sets for their users to use specifically within countries. So I think this flow is expected to happen anyway. And another piece of work that we have at the moment for SNOMED International is to put in place an agreement with ICH, who own MedDRA, and work with the MedDRA MSSO, put together an agreement which actually commits both organisations to ongoing maintenance and updating of the two maps beyond forever, for however long they're needed and however long there's a use case for them. And I would expect to have that agreement in place by the end of this year, so that we can move to the production release of SNOMED CT in April 2021, the map of SNOMED CT and MedDRA. And that production release will be available for the licensees of both products. I think it's important to stress that to gain access to the maps, you don't need to be a licensee for both products. You only need to be a licensee for one, although there are probably not a lot of benefits if you're not using both products together. So I would expect those who are actually moving into implementation and usage of the production release in April 2021, they will automatically be licensees of both products. From taking that a little bit further, I'd like to give you a little bit more detail about the mapping maintenance that we have worked on so far. Each organisation, SNOMED International and MedDRA MSSO, on behalf of ICH, have established a team to maintain the maps over time. The key is to sustain the quality of the maps as user needs evolve and as both terminologies evolve. So both organizations are committed to this because our terminologies don't stand still. So each release could well bring changes to the maps, an impact on the maps. And we obviously, our users, as they move into actual usage, will identify areas which they need further development on. At the moment, we're working quite hard on agreeing the ongoing processes to facilitate this. We are putting in place a request submission process and tools to support capturing of changes to the maps, and so that our users, but from both organizations and from outside each organizations, but those who've got licenses, can actually put forward requests for changes and additions to the maps. We've identified the first set of criteria for accepting requests, because obviously we need to review them and actually identify whether these are key requirements for the maps, or just somebody's interested, thinks something is missing, but actually they don't have a defined use case. So we are looking to make sure that there are defined use cases for any requests that are put forward. And we're working on the maintenance and updating processes, and then the release mechanisms. And we will continue in the short term until there's any changes required on producing 2 versions of the maps. One will be in spreadsheet format, and one will be in RF2 format, the SNOMED RF2 format. But again, we're very cognizant that over time requirements might change. From an access and distribution perspective, the maps will be free to SNOMED CT and MedDRA users. And as I've already said, there will be 2 formats. The RF2 is obviously of interest to those who have actually got live SNOMED CT systems, and the spreadsheet's currently for distribution to MedDRA users. And for people who don't actually have SNOMED CT systems, but actually might have SNOMED CT data available to them, such as researchers, and also regulators who actually see SNOMED CT data arrive, but don't necessarily actually have a SNOMED enabled systems. The release of MedDRA and SNOMED CT maps will be on an annual basis, with the production release, as I said, starting will be available in April 2021. And we will keep that cycle unless there is a global use case for a different release schedule. And we are certainly building in the opportunity to release things on an emergency basis. As the COVID-19 epidemic has shown us, we as standards organizations, we have to be able to do that. And only SNOMED CT and MedDRA licensees will be eligible to submit change requests for maps, and it will always be based on use cases. That's the end of my presentation, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Judy and Jane, for presentation. Can I ask the attendees to please give us a moment while we switch over from our pre-recorded content so that Judy and Jane can address the question you have been submitting live. Please also note that the session will be available on the events platform for the next 3 months. Hi, thanks Judy and Jane for the presentation. We have a couple of questions posted, and we have a few minutes to go on. So I'm going to present the first one, and I think it applies to both of you. So Jane, can you go first, and Judy can join in a bit later. Would like to understand how would this help in improving pharmacovigilance, and whether pharmacovigilance regulatory bodies across the world are adhering, integrating it.
Thank you. That's a very good question. I can speak from what is actually happening. We've been doing as part of the alpha release. The UK, for example, has already taken. They've already got data flowing from clinical records for yellow card reporting in SNOMED CT. So they've actually been able to take that, take the files, the alpha release files, and actually look at the SNOMED to MedDRA map and apply them as part of their use of the yellow cards and the flow which is happening. And what we're hoping, as you saw right at the beginning, the use case here is very much about actually deriving the data from the clinical record. So that will hopefully improve the accuracy of the data and also enable the flows to happen from the EHR in a more timely manner. So, and we've already got that instance here in the UK from the MHRA. Judy, do you want to add to that?
Yes, thank you, Jane, and thank you for that question, which is very much on point. I think a key use case for the maps, particularly in the SNOMED to MedDRA direction, are to enhance pharmacovigilance. That was our goal going in, to be able to use SNOMED CT coded data as an alternative source for adverse event reporting. And certainly MHRA taking the initiative in the Yellow Card app enables them to access clinical data and convert it into MedDRA for regulatory reporting purposes. And you'll see also from the number of consortium partners, we have a number of European regulatory authorities that are very much invested in this effort, and we hope that they will integrate it in their systems ultimately. I think going around the world too, we want to publicize the availability of the production maps when they come live in April next year, and we expect other regulatory authorities to participate in that. We have already had some indication from the US FDA that they are particularly interested in the maps, not so much from the adverse event reporting perspective, but they have a different spin on it. In the US, the structured product labeling is actually coded in SNOMED CT for the indications, the reasons for use for the particular medical product. So there is a keen interest from FDA's part to be able to interchange and flow the data from SNOMED coded indications, which would be used in the product labeling and hence in the clinical records, and be able to relate that to the equivalent MedDRA coded terms. So I think there's a lot of interest from the part of both the regulatory authorities and the healthcare providers and regulatory authorities and industry using MedDRA to be able to harmonize the coding of indications.
Thank you both. Unfortunately, I don't think that we have time for other questions, but can I please all the attendees, if you have any question for Judy or Jane, please join the chat room. They are available to answer your question there. Thanks again for joining the call.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.